Hi all, thank you, welcome, and for another one of our sessions on what I think will be a really very interesting topic. Welcome to Lincoln Watson from BraveGen, and this is an area of industry I think, well, I probably wasn't too aware of, and perhaps the same for many, where as designers and architects we think we're, or we'd like to think we are designing for energy efficient buildings, and we have a reasonable idea on how to do that. I think Lincoln's going to tell us on, explain to us how perhaps we're not doing so well at that, and delve into a bit of the detail on performance monitoring of buildings. So we know this is going to be more and more important as time goes on. There's been a little bit of a hiatus with MB from earlier days with the last government, and when there was a real emphasis on this and zero carbon initiatives. But I think, believe you me, we all want to build better buildings, and there is a real consequence for owners and developer, everyone. Yeah, so hopefully there might be some good levers in here that we can address our clients with as we work on. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much. So I'm Lincoln. Nice to meet you all. I'm CEO of a company called BraveGen. We're a New Zealand company that's been around since 2001. We were originally called Energy Solution Providers. We changed the BraveGen brand. It just probably represents a bit more of what we do today. In my background, I did graduate as an architect and moved into technology around the 99 when they were throwing lots of money at IT, basically. And I was over in the UK, and so moved out of the architecture sphere into technology and started running businesses in that space and teams in that space. So a little bit about us. We do two things really. We do carbon accounting, so enterprise carbon accounting. So 40% of the NZX 50, 50 of the largest companies on the exchange use our software to complete their mandatory reporting. So every year they produce their financial accounts. At the same time, they produce their carbon accounts. Their directors can go to jail if it's wrong. It's quite serious stuff. And the numbers produced from that is from our software. So it's accounting, but for carbon. And so we're adding up all of the emissions associated with their plane trips or their cars and the work from home, the building footprint that they have, the utilities that are associated with that. If they build buildings, the embodied carbon that's associated with that all goes into our carbon accounting system. So we help them report on their emissions. Then the other part of the business, which is our long heritage, is around building optimization. So that's where we help those organisations with large building footprints to reduce the emissions associated with them. And the largest way of doing that is through their utilities. So we monitor their electricity, water and gas in particular, along with a few other things, and help them become more efficient in terms of their operation. Most of what we deal with is large buildings. So we monitor about 3,000 buildings around New Zealand and Australia, so it's quite a lot. So if you think of it, we monitor every building that's associated with Auckland University. A whole bunch of Auckland Council, PFI, so all of their portfolio, we monitor all of their buildings. And what that means is we have meters in the building, and that gathers all the utility information, pumps it up into the cloud, where either our consulting team or other parties are looking at that data, working out how they can optimise it. And we also have AI running across that data, working out when there's anomalous usage patterns. So if usage start happening out of hours or on weekends, or certain patterns within the energy usage, meaning some hardware failures, etc., like that. So really good results for our clients. So we've saved about $140 million for our clients or their tenants, avoided stack loads of emissions, work with loads of companies, work with great brands in New Zealand and Australia, and lots of buildings. And just in terms of those brands, I mean, it's Spark and Chorus, and we do the emissions reporting for NAB Bank globally, BP in New Zealand and Australia, and a whole bunch of other large organisations. So we do tend to play at that end of town. But one of our longest standing clients is ASB. So we monitor every branch for ASB around the country, so even down to the tiny ones in Timaru. We're pulling all the data off those, and we work with them on a very regular basis, on a monthly cadence, where we're identifying where optimisation opportunities can occur, and they can reduce their cost and their carbon. So, and with them, we've helped them reduce their costs and carbon by over 50%. So there's a lot that can be had in there. So it's us. The types of customers we work with. So I mentioned a couple of them. So lots of property companies. We work with nearly all of them recently. So we just brought on, for example, Cooper & Co. So the whole Britomart precinct there, the Harbour Grounds precinct with Bailey's and the BlackRock team there. So lots and lots of those. In Australia, we work with Fulton Hogan Built, which is one of the largest construction companies in Australia. We calculate all their emissions. That's a monster activity. Naylor Love, McConnell Dow, etc., NAB I mentioned. And we're doing a lot of work in retirement living and airports at the moment. So a wonderful client of ours is Wellington Airport. They're one of the shining lights in the region in terms of sustainability metrics. We also work with Auckland Airport, Queensland Airport, and there's a few other smaller ones that come along with that, etc. So, and a bunch of retirement living in New Zealand and Australia as well. So, that crossover, particularly where there's emissions reporting needed, either mandatory or voluntary, and you've got a large building portfolio, usually large buildings, to be fair, but we do, and when there's a large portfolio of buildings, we monitor all of those. So that's kind of who and what we are and what we do. And really what I'm going to talk about today is talking about that, how design and the operational management of the building need to work together. And the reality is that it is a little bit broken. Not for big reasons, to be fair, but more sort of systemic reasons. What does it matter? Green Star and NABERS are two of the prevalent building performance ratings in New Zealand. We've imported them. The government have licensed them off Australia, as the UK government has as well. And then New Zealand Green Building Council administer them for the government. They have different spaces. Green Star's a little bit more expensive, a little bit more holistic. NABERS historically has been very focused on energy, but has broadened out into water now as well, and it's also was historically limited just office buildings, whereas Green Star touched more buildings, including internal fit-outs, residential, etc. But they've since expanded the NABERS rating schemes to include industrial buildings, retail, etc. So they're growing. They're following slowly the Australian model, where in Australia, for example, don't quote me on this number, but it's about 90% of the commercial office buildings in Australia have got NABERS ratings, whereas we're sitting around about 150 to 200 in that range. So it's quite significantly different penetration in terms of that. Now, the buildings with ratings tend to perform better, both in terms of carbon, energy, but also in terms of value. So the landlords are getting more money for them. They're able to charge more in terms of their rental yields. And the drift, we all have seen the drift towards the water in Auckland and away from the lower grade buildings that are kind of Victoria Street South, towards the higher rated buildings that are, higher quality A-grade buildings that are closer to the water. Those buildings tend to have higher performance ratings. And so you'll see good results for a range of parties, the tenants, the landlords, the property managers, etc. Quality ratings are a driver, so the government have legislation out for a certain size of tenancy. They have to be above 4 stars. And so if you own a building and you want a government tenant, you need to be a 4-star or above, if it's a certain size. And green finance is also one of the largest drivers now. So as they're seeking finance for their buildings to either buy it or improve it, they're getting percentage points off the interest rates that they're paying. So if you have large debt, it's a really significant amount of money that you're saving if you've got a green building. So the design is, how the building performs, as well as how the building looks and operates for the people that inhabit it. So it's really about bringing those two things together. It's not just getting a beautiful building built that people enjoy. It's actually making sure it stays enjoyable for a long lifespan. And that is really where the challenge sits that we deal with. So the design promises, what architecture is about, that the performance gets designed in, it'll stay, and good design will last, etc. But what we see is that the intent is often not achieved in the operation. Now, for a range of reasons. It's not kind of one party's fault or anything like that. And then what happens is when the building's commissioned and it's live, that a bunch of expected costs, the monitoring's not included, for example. And so nobody's considered the ongoing performance of the building and tuning that buildings will very quickly. Building management systems are wonderful things, but they also go out of tune very quickly. And so the building can perform quite badly quite quickly. There's a bunch of research that suggests that's as short as kind of 6 to 9 months. So they end up with unexpected costs. The building owners, etc., the property managers, and they end up passing those on to tenants often to meter it, to get the metering in place to achieve the ratings or just to make the building perform. Then there's often services needed to monitor it because it's not just all automated, it's not all just about metering. And obviously, getting these large office buildings or these large buildings built takes a long, long time. And meanwhile, AI, everything's moving faster. The digital twins, technology is moving very fast. So when these things were built, there is quite a disconnect between the time they were designed and they were actually built. And as I say, there's drivers there that didn't exist 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Green finance wasn't really around at that point in time. And so building performance ratings, which essentially is the now accepted measure of how a building is performing and should be funded or improving, and the funds that can be released associated with that. Those were very small in New Zealand not too long ago. They've grown significantly. They're growing, I'll make this up a little bit, but it's 20 to 30% year on year, the number of NABERS rated buildings that are assessed every year is growing significantly because of these drivers. And I'll just talk briefly. So we monitor the Harbour Grounds portfolio. There's 7 buildings in there, 88,000 square metres of office space, 3,000 tenants, I think. They've saved around about $3 million, 32% energy reduction since I think it's about 2014 we started monitoring them. Lots of carbon avoided. Now the issue is originally Goodman's owned them. They sold them to Blackstone and managed by 151, and Bailey's is the property manager for them. So there's a whole bunch of people involved. And they really want to improve the value of those buildings as owners. And it's not through design that they're going to improve the value, it's through those rental yields. So they aim to improve those rental yields largely through building performance ratings. So there's a very strong focus after the building was built around what that looks like and how it performs. And so we work with them continuously to every week, every month, we're down monitoring the building, tuning the building management system, helping it perform and helping improve the NABERS ratings associated. So ongoing value is really about that optimisation. It's, yes, there's value in the building, but it's driven by the rental yields, which is a combination of building performance and design. And just here, if you move from left to right, historical ratings of each of those buildings each year in May. And then we've got a number of initiatives there that in the kind of yellowish column that we're waiting sign off, that will continue to drive those NABERS ratings up. And all of those represent increased value for the landlord, reduced emissions and cost for the tenant, etc. And you can see there's quite substantial changes there through those star ratings. And essentially each of those stars mean reduced energy per square metre. There's a bunch of other maths inside it, but that's roughly what it means. And so you can see that as you drive up, and we work really hard with them on a monthly basis, as I say, to help drive those up. What's interesting inside there, so you'll probably have seen the AT building and the KPMG building, both not great performing buildings. But as you look forward, you can see that the AT building has the potential to move from 2-star to 5-star, which is pretty amazing. And so what is driving that? So I'll just, so on the left is the KPMG building. What you can see there, I was talking earlier about the skin on the outside, that wasn't originally there. And so what was going on is on the inside of the glass, it was 45 degrees. And so they ended up having to put the external skin on. This is quite a few years ago now, it'd be at least nearly 10 years ago, in order to somewhat insulate the inner skin and help the building perform better. Both buildings have got gas in it. So gas, not a great resource, not great for the climate, not great for the environment. So that penalises those two buildings in terms of their performance. And I can't remember the one on the right. That's the AT building on the right, but there was a couple of other things in the AT building that we've worked on. They've just done a big building management system upgrade around those gas controls and improving the efficiency of the gas usage in the buildings. There's small things that the piping that's in there, when the temperature changes significantly, the pipes shrink at different rates and leak in their air conditioning. And so there's a whole bunch of engineering-oriented issues inside older buildings that affect those building performance ratings, which don't necessarily sit with architects, but certainly sit within that design and build process. And so as they go through, some of those enhanced building performance ratings are driven by solar on the roof. And so office buildings traditionally have got all their services sitting up on the roof, and putting solar on top of that, it's not a particularly easy thing to do. However, that is actually really effective, weirdly, in office buildings to put solar up there. And they're doing a lot of that now because it really works with the profile. Obviously, people are in the office during the sunny period and they're not there at night. It's a perfect use case. Their constraint is making sure they can maximise their roof space. It's a major design issue. So these things where you're considering the ongoing performance of the building in context of building ratings, etc., become really important. They can seem hidden if you're down at street level, obviously, looking up. But those things really make a big impact. And they make it right through the whole chain in terms of what you're intending with your design and how that executes through the design engineers. Are they specifying building management systems that can be upgraded, etc., because they are changing pretty quick. The builders making sure that they're not just following the spec. One of the big issues that we have is when meters are specified in buildings, it's just the same old meter that was used last time gets specified inside the building. But actually they don't work. Well, they do. Sorry, that's unfair. But the ongoing, a lot of the work we do is replacing the standard system that gets specified in buildings. And we end up putting a whole bunch of other meters or other systems in place to pull that data out and help them be more efficient. And it was largely because 3 years ago when the building was specified, that was the standard meter that you put in. And it was nothing more than that. It was just nobody went wrong with specifying Big Blue, so we just put Big Blue in again, when actually it's not really doing the job because we can't get the data off it. And that's what's becoming really important. I mean, that's what a lot of the world is driven on these days. It's around data and having access to really near-time, real-time data to make decisions off. And that's a lot of what we do is that monitoring piece. So it impacts everyone around, and data really kind of now sits at the middle of it, whether it's that digital twin or the monitoring that's coming off the building from all of those devices, whether it's the utilities or it's the people arriving in the buildings or the air quality inside the buildings. So we gather all of those things inside our platform. And if you're looking at the design engineers, the contractors, subbies, the generic metering that I touched on is arguably the biggest inhibitor. So when the specs are written, it's X or equivalent, and so they don't want to get creative around that, so they put X in, and X isn't really working. The smart metering is very specific. It's you need to get the designs done early and signed off so they comply with your rating system, Green Star or NABERS, so that you make sure that it's metering the right way. One of the big things in New Zealand compared to Australia is that our buildings are wired awfully, and so it costs a huge amount to retrofit metering inside our buildings because we're spending, our tenants, our landlords are spending a lot of money buying meters in order to subtract usage when the tenant should be paying for a certain amount of load, or the landlord should be paying for a load, and we're busy extracting it. One of the big buildings downtown, the tenants were paying, the landlord was paying for a data centre sitting in the building, just because nobody actually knew. And so huge bills being incurred by the landlord, and until kind of we discovered that, this data centre was costing them a huge amount of money. And out of hours usage in a data centre is kind of the flag. So metering tells you all those things. Look, designs change. They do. You've got to keep your metering up to date with it. It's not just design it, forget, move on. We all know that designs change as buildings get built and etc. They need to change with it. So don't be generic. It's an important integral part of the design process, whether you're touching it directly or not. And the costs, the costs are always less at the start. We all know that. Good design is the best place to manage the costs. When it happens later, it's unexpected and usually worse. So that's certainly the one big ask I have for you is when this is going through, just ask about operational performance, what it's going to be like when tenants are in it, and what it's going to work like. Tenants obviously cost. It's a big one. But also, they want to be in buildings that they know that their carbon is optimised in. Then they don't have to deal with it because somebody else has. So when they're doing their carbon reporting, if you're a large listed entity and you've got buildings all over the country, you don't want to have to be dealing with utilities and reducing utilities and spending money on plant and things like that. You go into a good performing building, then the job's done. It's a good performing building. It's and somebody else is dealing with it, keeping up to date. So they want to keep their costs down, obviously, because they're going up. We all know that. But also, if they're in a good building, the job's kind of done for them. So it's one less thing they have to worry about as they look to reduce their carbon footprints. So hence the reason government is pushing for tenants to certain building ratings on their tenancies. Property managers, they're really busy individuals. They manage, they optimise the number of buildings to property manager, and they spread them kind of as thin as they can, obviously, as businesses do. And so when they've got reactive data, if you get a monthly bill, there's nothing on it. You can't, you cannot see if something's not performing. You've got no out of hours usage versus in hours usage. You don't have the detail to see what's going wrong. If it goes up, you can't really tell because there's so much usage. So monthly invoices are no good. They're rubbish. If they don't have the data, they can't have a conversation with parties. So the buildings we monitor for property managers and the council, they have their contractors who manage the regions. They come in, they have an issue. They log into the platform. They can see what load the issue is on. They can go away and fix it. They can come back and say it's fixed. It's all there. It's all in real time. And, job done and easy to sign off. If you don't if you're working on a bill a month later or 6 weeks later, you'd never know. And then the burden of money running off of a lack of data is too difficult. And, they're really busy. They're paying lots of bills. They're spread thin, So they want efficiency, automation, data management. That's what helps them drive their business. So they can be much more effective when they've got the data at hand. And so there's a bit of an example. That's an alert. So we've got a thing called Clive. It's an AI that monitors. We've got thousands and thousands of meters around New Zealand and Australia, much more than any human could ever handle. For context, we monitor the energy about the size of Wellington. So if we were an energy retailer, we'd probably be about the 5th largest retailer in the country. That's the amount of data that goes through our platform, terabytes of data. And so AI is looking at it all the time, just looking for anomalous trends. And there's an example there, the little red dots. These things shouldn't happen. I've got a couple of examples later in the deck if we've got time. And we're alerting for anomalous usage. And when you're dealing with neighbours ratings, we're right down at a daily level. It's these guys are tuning these buildings really tight. And so if something goes unnoticed for a month or 2 months, that's going to affect their neighbours ratings. So they're really onto this stuff. It's really important. So as I say, my big ask, design and specification, that's where you can have the biggest impact. Choose the right meters, get a design done, make sure it's done, that's going to satisfy the operational performance. Acknowledge, understand that data is really important to that time period for the next 25, 50 years of the building. And so this is going to occur whether you know about it or not. If you know about it, then it makes it so much better. So design for monitoring at the start. Make sure that any changes it keeps up to date. You've got to validate the baseline. You've got to validate the data that's not immediately accurate. And we've got a case where the solar was put on the roof and what's arriving. Well, first thing first, they sent the data straight into the grid, so they didn't send it to the building. Yep. So they didn't get any benefit from it. They were essentially just sending you get money back, but it's nothing. It's not, anybody who's dealt with solar knows you don't really bother putting money into the grid. They weren't sending it to the building at all. It's just badly wired. So the monitoring picked that up. And then we're able to see that what the specification of what the property manager, the building owner was sold isn't what's getting delivered. So, you can't believe everything on the tin. So really important having that. We monitor the zoo. So all of those monkey enclosures have our kit in it. Years ago, they put their kit in, they said, great, they saved a whole pile of money and reduced their energy, said, we're done, we're going to turn it off. Within a year and a half, they called us up again and said, hey, we need to turn it all back on again because their costs went right back up again. And now, whenever they build a new enclosure, they just specify our kit in. We monitor Eden Park. We own a whole bunch of buildings. It's kind of crazy. And then, on the ongoing side, which is really where we play, we deal with it afterwards and we help tune the buildings and keep tuning them day after day. And so we often come around where Green Star design and as-built is a certain level, and within a year or two, it's a couple of stars down. It's not unusual to run across that because of these issues upstream. So, and then if it's designed and commissioned right, then it's a lot more predictable. That happens later. Granular monitoring for materials, really important, as you all know. Envelope, I touched on it before about the KPMG building, has a massive effect. Our weather patterns are up and down. We mix, as we do our monitoring, we actually mix heating degree days and cooling degrees days with the data to kind of make sure that the patterns are aligning in the right way. Continuous improvement, it certainly doesn't sit still. We're always tuning these things. The landlords are investing in it. They invest significant amount of money to upgrade just the systems and controls and the asset itself, and then they'll obviously be changing out the heating, HVAC systems, etc. as needed. The sooner you catch the gap, the more efficient it is. Utility bills, you just can't see this stuff. You need the data. Ratings readiness, design it in, and you end up with proof and ongoing proof that your building's performing really well and sustains that value and keeps getting great tenants in. So with that, I'm kind of finished, but I think I've got plenty of time. So just kind of showing, I guess, bringing it to life a little bit about the reporting. So the alternative is manual reporting, super hard, time consuming. The property managers certainly don't have time for that. We bring all that data from PDF invoices and Excel spreadsheets. From the university, we get it from everywhere. We've got connections into meters directly. We've got sub-metering. We've got Excel spreadsheets arriving on whatever basis, weekly, monthly, quarterly. Utility invoices, we process hundreds of invoices every month for them. They've reduced the time that the finance team spend processing and approving invoices down from 3.5 FTE down to half an FTE. So they're able to do other things. First time ever they've been able to pay their invoices by direct debit. It all had to be done manually to check it. So automation's pretty cool. You can see kind of a dashboard on there and where the usage goes up and down, and it really does. That's a real building, and setting targets, reducing usage, and et cetera, et cetera. Savings, water leaks. Water leaks are huge at the moment, even in Auckland. I mean, man, we're seeing so much traction on water leaks. It's crazy. This wasn't the biggest one, actually. We found one that was around $50,000 a month that they were losing. This one was kind of weird. So we monitored from day one, high base load. Base load's kind of just the normal day-to-day usage. And one of our data analysts, we're kind of going, well, this doesn't seem right. And so it took a wee while to kind of get through the property manager, and there was no alerting because that was just normal. That's what it always did. And so everyone just kind of paid the bill and away you go. The finance team's over there, the property manager's over there, away you go. And you can see just at the very end there, the big drop. That's where it should have been all that time. It fell off a cliff. Yeah, quite amazing. And that's not on the distribution side. That's after the meter. That's on our side of the meter. So these are inside. You know where that water's going. It's going into the foundations. So that's a lot of water. $20,000. And like I say, there was another one for 50 that we found the other day. Fortunately, it was much shorter duration. 18% there. I mean, I touched on 32% at Harbour Grounds savings, 50% at Auckland ASB. There's some big numbers. And the HVAC there was again automated. Well, in this case, it was an automated alert that fired off. If it went unnoticed, it would have carried on because you wouldn't have seen it in a power bill. I mean, it's still decent numbers, but it's you just wouldn't notice it just because half the time the finance team is signing off the power bill and they just sign it off, and they're not looking for improvement. So that detailed data that the monitoring provides you lets you know early and gives you the detail as exactly where it's occurring, so you can know which floor it's on. Is it the HVAC on on a certain load? Is a control failed and that the thing's turning on and off and it's going to break? So it's turning the heat ventilation on and off quickly, and it's going to blow the thing up basically. All of those patterns get detected by the AI. So how do you frame that? This is a very similar presentation we gave to some of the property managers, so this is probably more oriented towards them. But a lot of it's around the data loggers, getting meters and loggers in place so you can get the data, make it all happen. And like I say, don't just fall back to the standard, please. There'll be a monitoring subscription so that data's got to go somewhere. There's costs associated, and then there'll be somebody who's doing something with that data. Making recommendations to the landlord, property manager, tenant, in order to work out what can be done. And there's big savings. I mean, there's really good savings So there's $140 million we're up to, somewhere in that range, that we've saved for tenants, landlords, depending on what they're on. So that's us. It's kind of what we do, and all the stuff to consider after largely after what you guys do. So pretty quick through that.
What I'm burning to ask is, what's your advice to an architect setting up a new project in appointing some key consultants to get it right?
I would be raising the question about what they're doing about building performance ratings and understanding whether they understand that. We met with a range of project management people the other day, and what they said to us was really interesting, that they're all in now, but it took their first client to actually turn around and go, no, this is what, I want to know how this is going to work. And all the way through, they're like, yeah, we've got the building management system, that'll deal with it. And it wasn't until they went live that they went, oh, actually, we can't do anything with this data. Nobody's monitoring it, and the building performance was dropping. And then that's when they brought us in to actually monitor the building, and it cost them more money, because it wasn't wider.
Service engineers.
Yeah, a lot of this is actually the service engineers. Yeah. It's not necessarily you guys, but if you can ask the question about what you're doing about building performance ratings, and understand whether they understand, and how they can see that building optimisation will occur when this is live, and also understanding what their perspective on ongoing improvements can be, solar. I would advise trying to avoid gas, obviously, etc. So those would be the things. Test their understanding. Find ones that understand it.
You mentioned metering as well. That sounds pretty crucial.
Yes.
How do you set that up?
Well, it's actually not as kind of bad as all that, because the building management systems have meters. They meter the building anyway. We tend to connect into those. The issue is whether the metering is set up to get a building performance rating or just optimise the building performance. They're not actually necessarily the same thing. So who here knows about how Green Star or NABERS ratings work? Yes, no? So choosing NABERS, there's three kinds of NABERS building ratings. NABERS is a little bit easier to talk to than Green Star. So you can do a whole building rating where the whole building's rated. But if you have multiple tenants in there and maybe one has a data centre, then your building rating probably will be bad because your energy cost per square metre, the rough metric, will be high. So you're kind of getting penalised. If you're the landlord, you want to do a base build rating. That's the base build is the areas that they control. The foyers, the lifts, the main heat, HVAC. So that the tenant stuff usage can be removed. But quite often what happens, like I say, that maybe tenant loads are sitting on the distribution for the base loads. And so we end up having to meter those to subtract them from the base load so they can get a true and accurate base load, a base build metering, base build rating. So you've got a whole building rating, base build rating, and a tenant rating. And they're all basically about isolating the usage. The base build's complicated. It needs to include all of the, if there's cafes and things like that, it needs to make sure that certain things are included. There's quite complicated rules. So it's around making sure you have a view on what the outcome will be, should also be incorporated in the metering design. Now, what happens under Green Star is you're needed to produce a Green Star design for metering. That needs to be signed off before you start. And so that's quite good, and I would recommend the same for NABERS, because then you know. So we work with specifiers to do that. We're not electrical engineers or mechanical engineers by any stretch, but we know how the metering needs to work in order to achieve the NABERS ratings or the Green Star ratings. So it's really just bringing those things together.
Do you think that industry actually knows what's going on and how to really keep up with it? And are they actually ahead of the eight ball?
They are. I'll say they're catching up, and like I say, some of the ones, and we were talking to them, it was only 9 months ago. So it's that's pretty late, given Green Star neighbours have been here for multiple years, 5, I don't know how long actually, it's probably 7 or 8 years.
So you'd say to architects, ask the right questions.
Yeah. And those questions are, largely around how are we going to ensure this building performs in the future? What building performance ratings?
Passive stuff, like,
Yeah.
what I might call building fabric.
Yep.
Passive stuff, which obviously is all part of this equation in the bigger picture. I guess that's not, I can see, your subject is more about ongoing management, but surely the way that a building is designed in a passive ongoing sense that costs nothing once it's paid for, in theory, is a huge contributor to this entire exercise, right?
Yeah, 100%. And
so, got a colleague sitting over here about, you're going to talk about windows. I mean, windows are a classic instance of this, selecting the right performance glazing is one of many huge factors in that equation.
Yeah, it's complicated. You're right. I mean, we don't get into the fabric side of things. We don't specify. We don't project manage any of the change or anything like that. We tend to be the policeman. And
you probably make a lot more money doing this than you would have as an architect, mate.
We're selling. Well, I moved from architecture into IT for a reason. One of that was money, but look, I know your job's complicated, and there are lots of different factors that are involved, and certainly design, how you design it, has a massive impact. And I would say that as you bring design together with the ongoing performance, there'll be some subtle trade-offs. And that technology side with the data, the digital twins, I mean, that's pretty complicated stuff. They've all got their place. And it's also further complicated by global landlords. When you're talking harbour grounds or whatever, and you've got massive companies buying them, they work to GRESB and other standards that don't really get used a lot here. So there's a lot there. But there are people there that do know the answer. If you guys ask the questions, you'll find the ones that do. That's I think the simplest advice.
Yeah, no, I concur with Mark, and that windows, in fact, are a thermal wound in a building.
Yep.
The amount of data that you're getting here, that it just seems to me that you're at the back end after the building's built. So how do you then transfer the knowledge back into, ASC, Mark, and others to prevent, in fact, the problem occurring? Because, in fact, what you're doing is identifying the problem. So what do you do, in fact, then to provide the solution to stop the problem from happening?
Yeah, look, the reality is it's this.
Yeah.
We're more than happy to come out and talk to people. We'd spend a lot of time talking to property managers. This is great. I was very excited by this. We've wanted to get in front of the designers, the specifiers, for years, because we're coming along going, it's going to cost you this much to retrofit, going, this is nuts, but this is what you have to do. And so, we've essentially gone through the industry, just educating property manager by property manager inside the Colliers, the Baileys and those guys, as to what this is, so that they can explain it to their landlords why they should spend the money on a whole bunch of metering, and all the other costs that come with it. So we're more than happy to talk to people, very happy to.
Similarly, you'd be willing to get around the table at a pre-design stage with the client and the architect, wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, we do that reasonably often now. We're very keen on doing that stuff because it makes it easier.
The data you must be enormous.
It is. So if you look at a lot of the studies that happen on buildings in New Zealand, they might be on 30 or 40 buildings.
Yeah.
And we've got 3,000 buildings. It's enormous. And on the carbon side, we report on emissions the size of Croatia.
Yeah.
That's how much data goes through our platform. It's terabytes of data. It's quite incredible. Yeah. It's quite crazy. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is just fabulous.
Yeah, thank you. It's good.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Kevin or yourself mentioned the current political climate,
Yes.
which is kind of not helping, to be frank.
Yep.
Have you been able to get round the table with, these people, or are they just kind of fly-by-nighters every 3 years and you just wait for the next round? Or because a lot of the clients of the company that I work for they're in chaotic retrenchment mode. It feels like at times, and they just, I'm talking about government agencies and quasi-agencies that are almost being forced politically into finding the cheapest solution to solve the day, and that's about it. And, it doesn't seem to include this sort of thinking. It's a battle. It's a massive battle.
Yeah, there's certain elements of that you don't want to get me started on. Yeah. So, yes, politically. So on the carbon side of the business, which there's a big relationship between the two, there used to be 250 odd organisations that needed to report under the legislation. That's now 70. And I was saying earlier, if you compare that to Australia, in Australia there's 8,000. So that signals the different intention between the two governments. Look, that 8,000 will reduce, don't get me wrong. The Labor government there pushed forward quite strongly in that space. Yeah, exactly where that'll go. But so that'll change, and globally things are backing off. But equally, so we're a member of the Climate Leaders Coalition, which I think is somewhere between 40-50% of New Zealand's GDP, mainly because Fonterra's inside it, but to be fair, but a lot of large organisations are there. The messaging out of there is companies are still getting on with this, even with the legislation backing off. The part of our business that's growing the most at the moment is actually the building part, interestingly, because of the ratings. We do about half of the NABERS ratings in New Zealand at the moment. So we're very dominant. We're very involved with a lot of property managers. So many of the new buildings that are built, we're involved with in some way or another, if they get transferred, etc. So we get a lot of exposure to the industry, and so we're getting growth off the back of that. And there's obviously less building. Things are tough in the construction industry, and have been for a number of years. So, yep, things are tight there, but this is still moving forward. Sustainability.
Is it private companies?
So a lot of what's driving at the moment.
Very enlightened.
Yeah, well, it's large overseas companies who are driven by sustainability, maybe more than here. So we don't have a lot of penetration into Christchurch because there's a lot of private landlords. They actually don't really care about this stuff until they want to get a government tenant on board, and suddenly they care about it. But we're in Auckland. It's very progressive, very push forward. But so there's still momentum at a corporate level that's going on in both carbon and building performance. But actually, a lot of it's also driven by green finance. A lot of as organisations like, say, PFI need to report their emissions, they want the data. They don't want to have to go to the tenant and get the data off them. They can put our meters in, get the data more efficiently, and then they're looking at, can they put solar on the roof and reduce their tenants' bills? And so they're doing great things, but they also are able to access green finance on the back of it. So there's quite a win-win little cycle going on inside the corporate world around this stuff. And so there is still push forward globally, even though governments are backing off. So it is quite a good space to be in. But yeah, things are definitely slowing at a regulatory level. I think, you touched on the data volume goldmine issue. I do have issue with some the short-termism of some of the decisions that come out of government and the government bodies. I think that could be more strategically managed, and you can come back to the 3-year cycles. And like I say, you don't want to get me started on that. But could we do better? Absolutely. We stood up and said, don't meter commercial office building. Don't throw loads of money into reducing the carbon associated with building optimisation of office buildings, because the cost per tonne was too high compared to other areas, which kind of works against us. But we believe that technology will be a rising tide that floats all boats, in terms of getting lots of buildings monitored and more efficient, and just lift that tide. So put your money into NABERS and Green Star as a systemic driver for building performance improvement. Now, I'm not saying that we change what the market's doing, but that's what's happening. It's a really good way to make the market move.
Bit of a change of subject. Have you had anybody in the residential sector as a client? I mean, are there any?
We
Maybe
don't
a
do.
couple?
I was going to say we don't do residential. But there was a fairly high net worth individual that had a energy efficiency issue in his rather large apartment building, and so we did get pulled into that to help really kind of help them understand why that was so expensive. But no, we don't do residential, and we can't really even do apartment buildings particularly well. Yeah. Yeah, largely because of the billing issues. We don't want to be a billing provider. You have to be regulated to do that. There are organisations that do that, and they're very good at it, for sure. Yeah.
Just actually on that, Mark, friends of mine live in, say, Christchurch, and you brought it up earlier, in that residential homes, and that at the moment they would be paying somewhere between $800 to $1,200 a month for their power.
Wow, that's got to hurt.
And that that the other driver, I think, to counter what Mark's saying, is that the operational costs of these buildings that you're talking about must be horrendous.
Yeah, there is Green Star for residential.
Yeah.
And again, systemic driver for improving quality in the environment, and you guys get involved with RMA and building the Building Act and all those good things. We all know that there's challenges around all that stuff. We don't touch residential.
I think there's smart tech out there now for res,
Yeah.
with meter boards and
Yeah,
switchboards.
that's pretty cool. That stuff. Yeah. No, it's pretty clever stuff they're doing, those guys.
But one of the gripes from the New Zealand Green Building Council is that we're still building to a minimum code, which still results in buildings overheating that you've then got to artificially cool, and then the reverse.
Yeah.
And yet we keep on doing it. We know it's madness, but we keep on doing it.
We're dumb, eh?
Or slow
learners.
Architects might
We'll
have
get there
something to
finally.
do with that. Those glass walls with no verandas.
It's a combination of that, but I thought also it's a combination of the difficulty sometimes of convincing people. And then you need to get licensed to do that in a sophisticated way.
I think the takeaway from this is that from the design perspective, we've got to have everyone at the table again at the beginning. We started, I know here, we started modelling for zero carbon, our projects for various ministries. That's dropped away a little bit, but it'll come back, and so it's twofold. You've got to model your building, make sure you've got the mass right, the right glass, the heat content is controlled. Then, this sort of informative reporting, at the table to start and really understand the building as a whole, holistically.
I mean, I know Jersey makes a huge amount of energy's gone into that as a service.
Yeah.
And at the moment it's very flat as a business, that little sector of it, because of the current climate.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah. Whereas in Australia, I mean, we do the emissions for Fulton Hogan. There's 28,000 suppliers every month loading data into the platform in terms of when they're building roads or bridges or all that stuff and built.
So we monitor it Fulton Hogan?
So it's not the operation. It's different actually. It's under their NGAS reporting. As they build bridges or roads, they have to measure the carbon associated with building them. So that's essentially the embodied. There's a bit of operational, but mainly embodied emissions that go into it. And so their Sparkies, their asphalt contractors are loading data. 28,000 of them every month. It's a huge amount of data, and built, like I say, is one of the largest construction companies over in Australia, and they're doing, I can't remember their number of suppliers. It's huge. Using EPDs to understand the emissions associated with the gym board that goes into their multi-story office building.
Right.
It's ginormous amounts of data.
So all these subs are reporting up, so they can report.
Yeah. And they have to do that every month.
The buildings are wired terribly here.
Yeah. Historically.
What do you mean by that? Do you mean hardwired, not intelligent in terms of the planning of the wiring or the circuitry? What do you mean?
Yeah, largely. So as I say, when you get to a building performance rating, it's really about being able to identify the tenant loads or the base build load or the whole building, which, to be honest, is just the land cover report. Yeah.
Deal with tenants individually versus
yeah, and then just nobody historically used to keep good records, and so knowing how the building was wired was in one person's head, and so all sorts of crazy things were going on, and like I say, data centres were on the load that the landlord was paying for as opposed to the tenant, which awesome if you're the tenant.
The landlord would just average it out and charge the coffee.
Yeah, pretty much.
He's got a little hole in the wall, a part of the data centre's bill.
Yeah. And so just it's crazy the amount of subtracting we do. It's just pointless stuff. It's accounting for it, but to create that standard. But newer buildings are better, for sure. There's a lot more care going into them.
Like a little story, years ago we went to San Diego and did the Midway aircraft carrier museum, and they said it had been rewired several times because it was a nightmare just to find the looms to change something, so they just rewired it.
Yep, that's kind of our life.
Altogether, not stripping out, it was added to.
It's a lot of data coming out of buildings these days. There's going to be more. And Green Star, there's a lot of stuff. A lot of work goes into it, both design and as-built, which is incredibly expensive, but then also the monitoring afterwards.
Got any farming clients?
No, so we don't do particularly well. So there's a couple of things. We did monitor farms for a while as a trial. The thing with farming is if they need to use electricity, they will. If they have to pump out a paddock, they will pump out a paddock because they have to. So they can't sit there and try and optimize stuff. They have to deal with the problem. Yeah, basically. And so their concern may be about using a decent pump, but it's not as predictable, and so it's very, very hard for those guys to optimize it. They do lots of wonderful work in other spaces, and they're sort of one hand behind their back in some other ways. But so we don't do a lot of farming. No. We did touch on farming for a little while, but we couldn't do it justice for the cost. Similarly, we monitored most of a whole bunch of petrol stations around the country, and we were monitoring down to the pie warmers, and at that level, it just really doesn't make sense. But they were again piloting it, trialing it out.
Yeah. ASB, I'm surprised they still got branches. The one in Timaru, they're still there, are they?
Oh well, I can't speak exactly for Timaru, but yeah, no, there is a lot disclosed, obviously. They've done a wonderful job. They are very dedicated in this space. We did a talk, an interesting one with Oyster. So I think it's still called Sea Drive over on the North Shore. They're a big data centre and stuff. So Oyster's a client, ASB's a client, and so the three parties, essentially property manager, tenant, and us, talked about the journey of that building, and it was a really good talk. So it's for FMANs, one of the educational things that we do. So for FMANs, and that is up on the FMAN site, talking about that. We've got a big talk about neighbours and how it all works. We did that with NZGBC, the Green Building Council. Again, educational stuff. We'll often speak at the conferences and things like that. It's pretty good work. Yeah. We that's the Green Building Council, etc. There's lots of clients here. It's wonderful going along to those and sitting down at tables with your client. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
No, all good. Support a Kiwi company as we take on the Aussies and battle it out over there. So, we're the largest sub-metering provider in New Zealand. We're the largest enterprise carbon accounting provider here. So we've got to look overseas now. So that's our next challenge, taking on the lucky country. Cool.
Good to know. No, it's brilliant.
Thank you. And yeah, anything anybody wants to know, just get in touch.
Okay.
Cool. Mucho.
Thank you everyone for attending. To claim your CPD points in person, just fill out the sheet that's just on the table there. If you're joining us online, just click the link in the chat and just make sure you fill that in by 12 o'clock tomorrow. Thanks everyone. Enjoy your evening.
Thanks.